Hello, and welcome to Will's Infinite Library. I'm Will, and this is my Infinite Library. It's been a while, so I wanted to catch you up on what I've been reading, what I've been up to, and why it's been a while. So the short answer is that at the beginning of the year, I was hard at work working on my own novel, City of Stars and Shadows, which came out late June. So just a few months ago. So I was really busy on like the final push to get all of that ready, and then on kind of promoting it and following up on that and taking a little break through the summer. So that's where I've been. And this is an urban fantasy novel, and it was kind of a new genre for me. I've always loved the kind of combination between fantasy and the real world in many different ways, as you know if you've watched this channel before. But this was my first, I feel like, real deep dive into writing pure, straight up urban fantasy. So I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I studied up on some of my favorite urban fantasy books that you know if you've watched this channel. Again, I felt like felt good about it, but I realized I had a gap where I read a lot of fantasy when I was younger, but then over the years I read less and less of it. And I realized the big gap in my kind of reading knowledge was epic fantasy, not just urban fantasy. So I wanted to go back and read some epic fantasy books that I'd missed over the years. So I started with this big honking book, The Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time series, because I thought, it's a bit older, like it's kind of in the zeitgeist. It's like it's a TV show now. So this is kind of top of mind for fantasy, and like a lot of what kind of informs urban fantasy is traditional fantasy tropes and ideas and themes that then get pulled into the real world so you can play with them in that setting, which is what I love to do. But I wanted to have that in my toolbox to kind of have that inspiration going into it. So I read The Eye of the World. I enjoyed it overall. I found it very slow and like not a lot happened. So I feel like to me it was a cozy fantasy in its own right, where I'd read like a chapter before bed. I would enjoy it, but I wouldn't feel compelled to read the next chapter right away. It wasn't grabbing me in that way, but I still liked it. It kind of follows a lot of the same kind of Lord of the Rings tropes of fantasy of a couple decades ago, that was pulling from all the same ideas from mythology and folklore. And it was solid. I'm glad I read it. I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'll continue the series just because it is so long and so time consuming. And I got what I wanted out of the first book. So that was The Eye of the World. And then I got really curious about Brandon Sanderson as I was reading, like, what is trending in fantasy nowadays? What do people like? What do people want to read? What do I want to read? So I picked up Mistborn because it sounded less intimidating than some of his other books. And also I really enjoyed Mistborn, and I enjoyed the world and the world building, found it a bit fresher and more interesting than in the Wheel of Time. Like, it felt a bit more original and a lot more cinematic, on a word level, on a page level, on a sentence level. I found it really engaging, and it did make me want to keep reading. So I read it a lot faster, not just because it's a lot shorter, but because it was just more engaging and fast-paced in that way, which was kind of a breath of fresh air. Because I think when I look back on why I stopped reading fantasy and why I read less of it over the years, was because often like traditional high fantasy has this like very archaic language, and I just don't find it engaging. It just doesn't pull me in. I find it a barrier where I just know that I'm reading. And Mistborn was the first fantasy book in a long time that I've read where I forgot that I was reading, and I wasn't looking at the page numbers or how many pages are left in the chapter. I was just flying into the next chapter and enjoying it. So that really kind of changed things for me. And I decided I wanted to read more Brandon Sanderson. So I listened to an audiobook actually of Tress of the Emerald Sea. And was kind of curious, but I didn't really think I would love it, but I actually did love it. It was very different from Mistborn. I think The Princess Bride was a big inspiration in terms of tone, and the tone was the thing that really makes that book sing, because it's very whimsical and lighthearted. It deals with some heavier themes and ideas too, but it was yeah, it just had its own kind of feeling that is another thing, again, that I miss in a lot of fantasy books, as I'm not as well read these days in the genre, where it just felt like its own world that I was stepping into. It wasn't this like big kind of collective conscious idea of elves and dragons and kind of D&D themes getting pulled in. It was like this unique world with this weird sea that was made up of, might be a spoiler to say, but it wasn't really water, and everything about it was just kind of a little different. And Tress herself was like a very fun character to follow, but she didn't narrate the story. The narrator was also really funny and made a lot of jokes and just had a really interesting perspective on the world, which is what really made it for me. And also made a lot of kind of quips and like clever kind of insights into the world, into our world and the fantasy world, that I found really enjoyable, and that often I find is a bit like cutesy or overdone in a lot of books that turns me off, but it worked for me in this one because I actually found the jokes funny, whereas a lot of times I feel like they're a bit forced when they're trying to make a narrator seem funny, or the insights will be very kind of surface level. But these were like quite interesting and layered, and I really enjoyed it. And so then I don't have a copy anymore of the next book I read. I was like, okay, I like Sanderson. I'm really curious to dive into the Stormlight archives. But the books are huge, like over 1,000 pages each. And even coming in after The Eye of the World, which was 800 some pages, I picked up The Way of Kings, which was 1,252 pages. The biggest book I've ever read by far. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I wanted to try it. I assumed I would drop it at some point and never make it that far, but I made it through the whole book. Again, I found it as kind of enjoyable on a sentence level and a page level as Mistborn, but there were so many different perspectives. That did slow me down a bit because I struggle switching between characters. It takes me a while to get up to speed and to get interested in what's going on with the next one, to get to know them. But I really enjoyed it, and I liked all of the main characters a lot, especially more as they connected. My main complaint with the book was that the pacing was very off, I felt. I don't think it needed to be 1,252 pages. Like, I think it could have been maybe 500 pages, like around maybe what Mistborn is, because so much of the book was enjoyable, but it would be the character doing the same thing over and over for literally hundreds and hundreds of pages, where you have Kaladin, who is like a slave, and he tried to escape in the past, but now he's kind of given up on that. So he's just going through daily life in this like harsh conditions. And a lot of people say like, oh, the payoff makes it worth it. And yeah, it does, but you just still didn't need all of that, right? Like, the story needs to move forward. Each scene needs to propel the action and the story forward. And even if it's not action, it needs to propel the character forward. And like, it kind of did, but it just could have done it with a lot less chapters and a lot less pages. And so that was kind of my overall view of it. I did enjoy it overall. I would like to continue the series, but it's so long. But anyways, what I really wanted to talk about this book was, and I said I read this giant book, but halfway through, the spine cracked in half, pages started falling out, and then I actually ended up cutting the spine in half, so I had two separate books, and it was pretty enjoyable to read it that way. It felt like a normal size book, and it was just kind of a different experience. But anyway, that's just painting the picture of how long it is. And the thing that was really of note to me was that I was so intimidated to read this giant book. I always intimidated by big books over 500 pages, and this was 2 times that and more. So it really changed the way I read, because I often read, like as I'm reading, I get distracted and ideas connect to different things, and I think, oh, this book is good. Like, for example, when I was reading Mistborn, I was like, oh, I'd like to read the Stormlight Archives. I'd like to read Tress of the Emerald Sea. And I'd like to read all these different books. And my mind starts jumping, and I'm like, start getting FOMO for different books as I'm reading. But this one, I was really able to focus because it was so long. I was like, well, this is just what I'm reading for the next several months. So I don't need to think about what's next or what I want to read. Like, I just pick, when I want to read, I pick it up. And that really helped me focus a lot, which I found really enjoyable. And it made me read like in terms of a marathon, not a sprint, where I was reading like probably 30 to 50 pages most days. And I didn't want to push and read more than that because I would burn out and then set it down and maybe never pick it up again. And I didn't want to read less than that because then I would never finish it. So that kind of pacing made me fit reading into my life in a very sustainable way. Whereas I find in the past, especially recent years, I've been really like motivated to like learn from books or like get through a genre, like I was saying, like read a bunch of urban fantasy to inform my own writing. And so I would push to read as much as I could to get as much foundational knowledge or inspiration. And then I would burn out and I wouldn't read for months. So this helped me really like read a bit each day in like what was a good amount for me. And that was great. And I find like I'm sustaining that now after reading it. And I'm less intimidated by long books now, which is nice. Like it opens up a whole new world to me in terms of reading, but it also makes reading feel more fun and enjoyable because I'm just pacing myself better. Like it really taught me how to read in a good way that is kind of what I needed at this point in my reading life. So I've been reading a couple books since, which I'll talk about in the next video probably, but they're just flying by now and it feels less like work. It did feel like work before, where I felt like I had to read to be informed, to be in a conversation. And now I feel like I've just fit reading into my life in a, I guess, sustainable way is what I keep wanting to say, where I read the amount that I want to read, that I enjoy, and I fit it into my life in the right way, in the right spaces. So anyway, that's just kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today, was this kind of like reading epiphany that I've had lately as I delved into these giant books. So that's what I've been up to lately. If you're curious, check out my novel City of Stars and Shadows. It's available in paperback and ebook. And let me know what you've been reading. If you've been reading any fantasy books or other genres, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. And with that, I will let you get back to your reading. See you next time.